Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing today? We have a few more minutes. Let me just test my other camera because you may find this funny. It's funny now. It wasn't funny a few minutes ago. I was all set up and ready to go with my serger with the pillowcase for Saturday's class. So I had to take the serger down, put the big machine up. I'm tired. Phew, that was a lot. Get my fabric out, get my Gemini out, get my plates out. So I'm good to go. How's everybody doing? I hope I got the right class now. This is Thursday, 7 p.m. It's Gemini night, right? My camera is in a different spot so that I don't bump into it. And it's set up for another class. Hope that's okay with you. Excuse me. Let me just check my other camera because I had it set up for the serger, so that looks pretty good. That looks good. We're good. Okay. So, hi to everybody. Go ahead and join in the chat. Say hi. Let me know if you're cutting or sewing along tonight. In the description, I put a little link for the pages that we're going to use tonight, so you can download those. Oh, hi, Lynn. How are you? I was all discombobulated, Lynn. I got all set up early. I was all excited, and I don't know. And my intro was set up for the Gemini, so I don't know where my brain was, and I don't know what I was doing. I don't know what I was doing that triggered my brain, but fortunately it did. Otherwise, you'd see me now scrambling around. And let's see. I'll show you. I found one of my little. I've got to go this way. This is I don't know when from 50 years ago. No, more than that. Yeah, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. I get a little grease on it. I don't have the clamp that clamps it to the table, but let me get a little piece of fabric here. I just happen to have one by my feet. Don't ask why. And so it's a little hard to do this without the clamp, but it'll go. So just give me I gotta have a second to get it started here. Here we go. Because I have to crank it and then guide it at the same time. I haven't quite figured out how to do that without a clamp. And it turns real easy. And it does. Oh, I'm going over here. The camera's not there anymore. It pinks the edge. How's that? Because I have a hard time pinking shears. Oh, Lynn, you taking notes tonight? Yeah, I feel like I should be taking notes tonight. I should take notes on how to set up for whatever class I'm in. I find with pinking shears, they're very hard to use. They're hard to, to squeeze open and close, and I can't close my right hand all the way, so it makes it even harder. So I knew I had this in my stuff somewhere, and you think about it, but you really don't go look for it. So I did that. So, oh, it pinked it. Isn't that clever? And it has a little gauge right here, so you can move it in and out, so you can keep it right up against the guide. So this little guide thing. So now I got to figure out. It has 2 indents here, and 1 indent on this side on the base. See down here. So I just got to figure out how to clamp it. I don't. So anyway, so that was a little killing time. How was that? But it does really a nice job. And when you pink something, oh, sorry, it's going to take me a while to get used to the camera's not on my left. When you pink something, the whole point of pinking it is so it doesn't ravel. So if you're using the sewing machine, for example, we did the pillowcase last week. So if you do it on the sewing machine instead of the serger, excuse me, and you don't want to do the zigzag after to keep the seam allowance from fraying, you just have to pink it with your pinking shears. Oh, you know what? They do make a rotary cutter, a wavy or pinking rotary cutter blade. And I think it'll fit in your regular rotary cutter. So you could do that. Okay, so I think we're all set to go. So let me just pause for a minute. Okay, good evening, everyone. We're working on our resource book for our Gemini using the Build-A-Block die set. And, oh, you're not supposed to see those yet. And these are the ones we've already done. So that would be in last Thursday's, that would be January 7th at 7 p.m. in that class. So today we're working on these. I'm showing you this one because this is next week's, where we take pieces of what we've already done and we make a 8-inch block with it. So we're going to start out with the big block. So this is an 8-inch block pinwheel. I'm trying to do it so it doesn't, there we go, pinwheel. So if we look back in our resource book to the first page, we're going to be making some, using half square triangles to make our pinwheel. As you can see, there's your half square triangles. So we need 2 fabrics in order to see the pinwheel going around. So let me grab 2 fabrics. Let me set this down. So this block is bigger than so the instructions, the actual instructions of what die we're using is, all right, I gotta get used to this, is underneath here, and it's the half square triangle, 4.5 inch half square triangle. So we'll get that out, and we need 8 half square triangles, 4 of each color. Okay, tonight hopefully we'll keep it fairly simple, so I don't want this filling your resource book to become like, hurt your brain kind of thing. So I got to get my plates out. Set that out of the way. I have the Gemini again like I did last week. I have it, excuse me, I have it behind me. So hopefully it makes a little less noise than having it right here because my microphone is right nearby. So I'm just going to get my plates kind of ready. So I'm going to, this is my plate with all the marks and grooves in it. And my tin's staying pretty flat. But remember, like I said last week, when you're done, run it all through without any dyes in it once, and that'll take care of that. And then run it through 1 or 2 times, like this sandwich like this. Run it through 1 or 2 times to help flatten out that plastic, the plastic shim. Okay, so, you know, the one thing I didn't get, didn't you, the blocks. So we need our box of dies. So here's your build-a-block box of dies with all your die shapes there. And we need the half square triangle, so make sure you look on your drawer and it's half square triangle. And I'm going to use, so I want the 4 1/2, so that's the big one on the, it's the biggest one on the smaller side. How's that? And you can see it says 4 1/2. And remember how I said when you're done with a block, put everything away before you get everything out for your next block. Okay, so I got my die, and I'm going to set my die down so the cut side is down, because I tend to forget after I pick it up and put it on. So if I have it already face down when I put it on, it should be good to go. And let's see. I'm going to use some red fabric. So I need 4 of these. So so let's look at our half square triangle. The long side is on the inside. Remember, we always look to make sure that out at the edge is straight of grain. So if we look at our half square, here's that long side, which is on the bias, and we want it on the inside because we're going to quickly sew these 2 pieces together. That stabilizes that bias edge, and out here we want to make sure we have a straight of grain. So let's just test our fabric. So straight of grain is this way. So I'm going to be putting these on in this direction. So let's see what how I can get 4 here. So there's 2. I'm staying away from my folded side. Now, what I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm going to cut a strip because I have a long piece of fabric here. So I'm just going to cut a strip that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. So let me just quickly do that. And you may have to do it too, instead of trying to work with a great big piece of fabric and with straight of grain. Yeah. And I don't have to be perfect because I'm, going to be cutting some off. So that's my red. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I want to make sure I set it, the die, so it's over here. So I should be able to come back to this side and use up that whole piece. So I'm just going to come down a little bit. I'll do this way, I guess. So I'm coming down from the edge a little bit. But now I've got to have my other color. Okay, so this is straight of grain, so it's this way, and I don't think this one is big enough. Oh, it's just short. So I've got to go this way. And I will still save, you know, this extra part here can still be used. Okay. Okay, so this one has a fold. This top one has a fold. So I'm gonna I always put my fold on the right. And then I put my die over towards the left. Okay, so this is going to give me 2 of each, and then I should be able to turn this die around to this area and get the other 2. That's my plan. That's my game plan. So let me get the rest of my sandwich in order and go ahead and cut. So you can go ahead and cut yours. Okay, and I'm just going to lift these 2 off. I'll go ahead and take these pieces out and just turn this. And I just pulled this down a little bit. And I could be right along the edge of this fabric where the cut is, but that's why I came down a little bit, to give myself a little more room. And so I just got you can see, I just got like 1/8 of an inch of fabric showing. So my die is definitely on all fabric. And I'm just going to pull this down a little bit. Get my tape, my low tack tape. And it's okay if I have fabric hanging off of this end. I just don't want it hanging off the end. This is how I'm feeding it in. I don't want fabric hanging off of that end. But at the rear end, the end that's coming out of the Gemini last, going into it last, there's no problem there. And go ahead and feed that in. So go ahead and feed yours in. Okay, and I'm going to take my other pieces off. Oh, I got one little thread. Remember, if you have a little thread that doesn't cut, don't yank it. Just give it a clip. Take my die. And use my piece of tape again. And here's some pieces I can save to use later on. And now I'm going to just go ahead and put my die back in the box. I don't have to snap it in. I'm just going to set it in where it belongs. And I'm going to set all my plates out of the way. Okay, so when we stitch these, so let's set up our pinwheel. As even if you know how it's going to go, I always set it up anyways, and then I'll tell you something more. You gotta get your pinwheel set up before I tell you anything more. You know, of course, I can't see you, so I don't know if your pinwheel's set up or not. Okay, so there's my pinwheel. So if this was a more complicated block, I would leave it down and I would pick a section, put it together. But in this case, it doesn't matter how you sew these. You're going to sew I'm going to call it the solid color. The solid to the print is going to be the same for every one of them. So I can just take these, and if you're not sure, remember we're pinning the long side. If we had some pins, there we go. So I'm just going to stick a pin in the long side, flip another one over, and I'm not lining it up perfectly because I can do that at the sewing machine. I just want to pin in the side that I'm sewing, even if I really know it's on the long side. Okay, so I have all 4 of them ready to go. So let's get sewing. Okay, so when I pick one up, now I've got my regular sewing thread. Today I've got my 1/4" foot with the guide on the side, little guide. Normally, you know, I'm using the J foot and changing, but I thought I'd mix it up for you today because I know some of you use your 1/4" foot with the guide, and when you do, your needle needs to be in the middle because it's a single hole foot. If you look at it, it's got a smaller hole, though some of these have an oval opening, oval hole, and that means you can probably, hi Rhonda, that means you can probably move your needle right or left, maybe one click, one touch, okay? But some of them have just that single hole, and you've got to keep that needle right in the middle. So as a hint to you, let me see if I have it in my hint book what number it is. Or I may have to write it in because I hadn't written these all down. So I'm going to make it hint number 20. So you can write this down, or tip number 20. Always remove your 1/4" foot with the guide from your machine when not using. And that's a real important one, and I'll tell you why. I forgot we haven't used the old tip book in a while. The reason is, so you have your 1/4" foot with the guide on. You quit sewing for the day. You shut your machine off. You don't get back to it for 3 or 4 days, weeks, months, whatever it may be. And you go, oh, I got to fix this pair of pants. I just need a little zigzag. You turn the machine on. You flip to the zigzag. You touch your pedal. Broken needle. Possibly knocking your machine out of a line, which means you got to pay $100, $125, $150, depends where you live, to have it fixed. Don't think, even if it's say, so you're sewing tonight and you're going to sew first thing in the morning, just drop the foot off, set it aside. I'm just over here. Set it aside, doesn't need a foot on it, and then shut your machine off. Because we really never know, with life the way it is. Our plan may be to get back to our machine after lunch, whatever. The minute I know I'm going to shut my machine off, or I'm going to walk away from it to have lunch, run to the store, that kind of thing, not just to go to the bathroom and back. Hopefully we don't get distracted, but you could, I guess. But I just automatically just take it off because I don't feel like having a repair for my own stupidity, which happens often enough as it is. So, and you'll definitely break the needle. So just always take it off. It gives you practice besides. If you're using the 1/4-inch foot that doesn't have the guide, because there's a 1/4-inch foot and there's a 1/4-inch foot with the guide, still has that single hole or that narrow hole, just take it off. Just take it off. Just hear my voice saying, yeah, she said take it off. You might as well just take it off, otherwise, you'll jinx yourself. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and line this up. I'm taking my pin out. I'm lining up, as always, obviously right here I'm lining up. Then I want to line up here, and then I want to be lined up here, which automatically should have me lined up at the bottom. Okay? And we're always sewing. I sew just, okay, you see the notch there? So you see how it slants across? So just to the right of that corner is where I sew. And you have your guide on, so you should be able to put your fabric against your guide. Make sure you have fabric under your needle. I gotta see if okay, just wanted to make sure my pedal was plugged in, because that was a little bit of a race there. And remember, we always hang on until we're done to sew. Okay? I'm not going to cut it. I'm just going to leave them attached. Had a piece of paper stuck to my foot. And just for the, I don't know, for the fun of it, we'll just have them all with the dark side up. Just makes it easier when you go to sew. So I'm going to start the next one. I don't want to bump into this guy. I just want to have, the needle's going to probably go off for one stitch and then on to the next fabric. Okay, another one. And if you need to, double check that you got right sides together. Sometimes we have a moment. And the last one. And you notice I kind of just scooch it around, for lack of a better word. If I keep picking it up and moving it, I'll never get it right. But if I kind of scratch on it, if I need it just to move it a little bit. I've never been able to pick it up, line it up, pick it up, line it up, and get it right. I have to get it close and then kind of scooch it around. I had to double check to make sure that the long side, I was so worried about over here and down here that I didn't pay attention to the long side. Okay, and here we go on our last one. Okay, so let's switch back to the work table. So we should have this long line, and they don't need to be any particular order right now. We just want to cut them apart. The point of this particular chain piecing was just to get it done faster rather than cut the thread and start the thread and cut the thread and, you know, start the thread, that whole thing. Okay, so so today, you know, I usually bark at you about pressing. So today I'm going to press just for those of you that feel that you just have to press. These are bigger pieces, it's not so bad, but you want to make sure that the dark side is up so that when we flip this over, the seam allowance, which is right here, when I flip that over, you can see the seam allowance stays right there. Now normally, I would use my wooden iron, and I wouldn't use it on my pressing mat because that doesn't help any. But if you feel the need to press, this is all we're doing. Just on the seam. See that? We're gonna press to set the seam. Sorry, I didn't do that the first time. Open it up, press. Okay? Press to set the seam, or roller, whichever one you're doing. Flip it over, and when you flip, the iron can nudge it the rest of the way. As long as you keep your iron in business on the seam, don't keep going out here and going around and all that. These are pretty big pieces, so they're a little more forgiving. Okay, let's double check to make sure that our seam is going towards the dark side on each one of them. Okay? Now, if you're following along and you don't have the Crafter's Companion die set, and you cut your own triangle, half square triangles, you're going to end up with little dog ears, little corners that come out, and they'd come out past this area. Oh, I gotta have my hand around backwards now. They would come out past here. You would just snip those off. Okay, so we're going to set up our pinwheel again. And going round and round and round. I know that this red isn't going to go against the red. And that isn't going to work because it's out there. So I just have to turn it one more time. So if you automatically just put down your fabric so the opposite color is next to the red, and then you just turn it until you have a pinwheel. So if you look at it clockwise, there's your pinwheel, and they're going this way. I guess you could look at it counterclockwise if you wanted to. We just need 2 pins this time. So now when we sew these together and chain piece them, we're not going to cut them apart because we want them to stay grouped together so everybody's where they belong. So we're going to do the column 1, column 2, turn the page. So we're going to turn the page, which puts this unit on top of the first one. So column B or 2, column B is on flipped over like you turn the page of a book on top of column A. And I'm going to stick a pin because you now really need to pay attention to what side you're sewing on, because if you get this over to the machine and you're fidgeting around or whatever, and you end up sewing over this side, then you're not going to have your pinwheel anymore. So this time it is important to put your pin in before you pick anything up. And what should happen is these seams, because this one, the top seam is going to the left, the bottom seam is going to the right. So they should snug in right beside each other the whole way. Okay, so if you want to get your seams snugged in, and lined up on the outside before you pick up, because this is a bigger block, so there's not as much room up on your machine to do it. And I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, did I move that? Did I move that around? I'm going to unpin and double check. Nope, I'm good. And I had it so nice and lined up. Isn't it funny how we're always doubting ourselves? Did I do that? Did I turn it right? Did I? Can wear ourselves out that way, can't we? So I'm feeling down along here. I shouldn't feel any big bump because the seams are side by side. So see, you can see here. So if I pull this back, everybody's lined up. Okay, now I've done it again, haven't I? All right, hold that pin right there. Double check. And if I didn't have my other block done, I would have to open them both up to double check to really know whether I got them right or not. Okay. Now I'm going to look here because, can you see my red? See my red is showing? So I don't know if I don't have this lined up or if I just need to scoot it up a little bit. So if your fabric's like a tad off, a sliver of fabric off, but you're all lined up. So I'm lined up here, I'm lined up here, I'm lined up here, but I'm just a little off there. That could be just the way I sewed the seam, you know, when I sewed the two half squares together. I could have just sewed a little off, so I'm okay. So, but I want to make sure, I'm not going to pick these both up at the same time because I don't want them out of order. So I'm just going to pick this one up. And let me switch over to the machine. To the machine. Here's my pin. So I can go ahead and get this lined up before I take that pin out. If I take my pin out, remember I'm holding my fabric down when I take that pin out. You can leave your pin in for a little ways if you want to. Just don't sew over your pin or you'll be back at the repair shop again. Picking up my next one. My pin's over here. Again, I'm holding my fabric when I take that pin out, and I've got my fingers down, this one especially, because that's lining up that edge. Couldn't find my little cutting pedal there for a minute. Okay, let's go back to the work table. So here's my two pieces, and they're held together. So nobody's going to get in the wrong place. Now what I have to determine is I have to have one of these seams going to the right, and I have this seam going to the left. So this one's going to the right. So the fabric I'm going to flip to the right is on top. And I'm just going to use my roller because that's what I would normally do. Okay, now this one I don't want to flip to the right because my seam would be on the right. So I'm going to just flip the whole thing over. And now when I flip it open, that seam is going to the left. This one is to the right, this one's to the left. If you do this one to the left, do this one to the right, whichever way. Whatever way feels easier for you. And I just put my fingers here and kind of pulled these apart because I could see I was getting a bit of a crease there because it was kind of like bunched up. Okay, so you should have what looks like a pinwheel, a little off, but because you have that 1/4 inch seam there. But a pinwheel nonetheless. So everybody look like a pinwheel? Row 1, row 2. Whether you flip it down or flip it up, that's up to you. I'm going to flip it up, okay? And I want to make sure that these 2 center seams, this one and this one, are nestled together. And I'm going to put a pin in, so I'm lined up across the top. I'm going to put a pin in after that seam. And I'll show you. Oh, so here's my seam, and I'm just after it because I want to be able to sew onto that seam so my needle is holding that seam in place, the lining up, before I have to take my pin out. Plus it tells me which side I'm going to sew on. Now I've got to pay attention, excuse me, and make sure that my side and bottom, they should all be lined up or pretty close to lined up. And you see this seam here? It's in alignment with this one. So you should be able to feel that going all the way down, should be nice and flat. And so can you see my white is showing there? So I'm going to make sure that to bring my red top fabric over so it lines up with my underneath fabric. And I'm going to pin that about, 1/2 inch or so in. See, my pin is right here. And I've got this little bumpy thing, so I want to make sure that when I pinned this center one, that my seams were lined up. If I just give this a slight tug, everybody lays nice and flat. But I'm looking down here, and this top unit just wants to keep going that way. So I'm going to stick a pin down here. See where I am right here? Just to keep this part where it belongs. And I want, stab myself. I want to make sure I feel all the way down this seam to make sure my seams are lined up. And I'm going to show you how mine looks because nobody's going to be perfect. And I'm going to take my pin out at the seam, make sure I've got that all nice and flat. Sometimes if we pick things up to pin them, excuse me, we're a little off. So I'm looking here. Can you see how you can see that red? But if I look down at if I look at the bottom, I have a little red showing there. So I'm a little off probably in my sewing. And it's a sample, but I still want to be careful. So I just had to come back down here. I wasn't lined up down here. And I lined it up, and then I kind of scooted my fabric that way so it lays nice and flat. And now I'm lined up along the bottom. And I still have that little, see how I have that little bit of red there, right here by my thumb? So when I stitch, my foot, my seam guide, is going to follow along the red. So as I'm stitching along, my seam guide is going to be right along the red. As long as I have enough to stay inside of my seam allowance, I don't need to fidget or redo it. I should be okay. But I do want to check and make sure my seams are lined up. I know it's a pain in the neck, and I know it's just a sample, but let's try to get it as close as we can. So now we're just going to we're going to go across, and this seam should be, all the seams should be like they're all facing me. No matter which side I go on, they're all facing me. Okay? I just want to be careful. I got 1, 2, 3 seams right here. So you'll hear probably a little bump, bump, and it's okay, it's fine. You just keep right on going. Your machine should be just fine. So let's go ahead and sew. So now, so you can see my red, and it looks bigger in the camera than it is. I just have to feel like that seam allowance keeps running away on me. So I fix that seam allowance better, this one right here. And see how I just have maybe a sliver now. Okay? So my guide is going to follow along the red. Okay? I'll pull that pin out. Make sure I'm all squared up. Oh, you can see we did make a little extra noise there. Holding my fabric when I pull that pin out. Hanging on to my fabric until I'm done sewing. And I'm going to make sure I take this other pin out before I do anything and leave it in by mistake. So let's see with my little wonkiness how it all came out. So that looks pretty good. Now you got a big bump there. So let's see what we can do about that bump. Now we can try the twirl method. I always try that first. So I need my seam ripper. And here's the seam we just did right here. So here's the seam we did, running right along here. And right in here, we're going to have stitches that are, well, that's not helpful, that are to the right of that seam allowance that we're going to, or that seam that we're going to take out. And there's going to be some on this side and some on the other side. So let's do that if you can. This is a pinwheel, so sometimes it doesn't work out quite as magically. I may have to take my glasses off to see them. And I can just kind of go in and open up and any of this fabric that's up past that seam that we just made, those stitches can come out. And they are a little hard to get to. Okay, so let's see how this works out. So my seams are all going counterclockwise. So that means this top one needs to go to the left and this bottom one needs to go to the right. And as I get up here, let's see if I can, generally it'll make like a little pinwheel. Okay, mine doesn't, mine's kind of a 4-patch, but as long as you get it to be so much flatter than that bump that you had to start with, it's good. And now I want to press this center. If you can't get in and get those stitches open, then I would take this seam and open it, which means half the seam goes to the right, half the seam goes to the left, and open it the whole way down. You just want to get it so you don't have that big squishy knot. Feels like a knot in the center. Okay, and you notice how I'm just pressing. I'm going to flip it over. And I can iron a little bit in here because I'm not out near my edges. And look how flat that got. Now I can see I have one that's not even close to perfect. So let me show you because I'm not going to worry about it. You see it right there? So he didn't come in where he belongs. So you know when I was fidgeting with my fabric and it wasn't quite right, I should have just stopped, unpinned it all, make sure everybody was lined up again. So see how he's just, and it's not, I mean, I've got you like right up in the camera, but you see how that one pin of the pinwheel, oh, right here, isn't in all the way. But would I do it over? Really would depend. I'm not going to do it over for a sample, but it really would depend on, I would let it go for now. And as I'm working on things and I keep looking over at it, or I put other blocks around it and I don't notice it, I would let it go. But if it keeps bothering me, I would take it apart, because if it bothers you for several days, it's going to bother you forever. So you have to just, let go and take it apart. Okay? So there's our first sample done. And this should measure 8.5 by 8.5. 8.5 square. And I can see I'm going a little downhill, which is what this block is causing. So if I was doing this to put in a quilt, yes, I would fix that. Only because it's making me, let's see, it's making me go down. Is it going down? Yeah, it's kind of going downhill here. So you can see I have less grid showing and more showing down here. Though it looks kind of even in the camera. But if my block is now crooked, I really need to take that apart. But for a sample, we're okay. Okay. And you put your die away. Everybody's put their die away. So this next one, let's do this one first. This is the snowball. No, we'll end with that one. We'll end with an easy one. This is a square, a diamond in a square, or a square in a square. So on the instructions, I put to use a square, the 4.5 square with the 2.5 half square triangles. This is really not going to be 4.5 because we've covered it over. It's hard. I was trying to. I was only pausing because I was trying to think of an easier way to say it. So this is probably like a 3.5. So let me get my. When you go on point, so when a square is this way, so it's square to you to look at. Forget about these points. That's a regular square. When you turn it so that when it's in your quilt or whatever project you have, and the corner of the square is pointing up instead of it being flat across here, that's called on point. So they call it a diamond in a square or a square in a square. And normally this it would be, I think it's 3.5. Let's see. Okay, so you could cut a 3.5 inch square, and then you would put half square triangles on each side. But it comes out a little that you might question whether you had it right or not. That's the best way I can explain it. So we're going to do it the easier way. Well, hopefully you'll think it's the easier way. So we're going to use our 4.5 inch square, which is next to the biggest one. So see, it's really that size. And then we're going to use the 2.5 inch half square. So that's the middle one on the bottom. Well, mine's the bottom. The middle one on the smaller side, and it's marked 2.5 inch square. I was debating whether to do this one or the snowball one first, and I think we'll do this one first. I'm not sure that it makes that much difference. Okay, so what we're not going to be doing is it isn't going to line up here. You see, it doesn't work that way. It's going in this corner. That kind of makes sense to you? So see, here's my square. I've got it on point. But when I'm sewing it together, when I'm sewing the pieces together, I'm not on point until I'm done. I need a square or a half square on each corner here. Which covers this into making this diamond shape. I'm not sure how else to explain it except let's just roll with it. So I'll keep this right nearby. Let's see, can you see it there? Okay. All right, so we're going to cut one square and 4 half squares. My square is 4.5, my half square is 2.5. Okay, so let me set this right here. And let me get some fabric. And I'm just gonna do a little rough cut. I only need one of these. Well, that was a rough cut, wasn't it? And I'm gonna just give it a little press. Okay, so that fits there fine. And now I need 4 of these. Now this doesn't matter straight of grain or not, as long as you're not putting it this way on your fabric. So your straight of grain should be either this way or this way. Doesn't matter which, because it's square all the way around, and we're going to cover all 4 sides anyway. Okay, so now I need a fabric for my half square. I guess I can use the, oh, let me see what I got here for red. Let's see if I have enough red left. So I find now, see, if I fold this, I don't have enough. But if I leave this like that, can you see it all right? So if I leave this like that, and then I can turn it to do the other side. But if I folded this up, I can't get it all. Well, I could. That's a close one. Let's see. I want to make sure that these ends are lined up. You see how close I can get. But instead of fudging around with that, I'm just gonna, because sometimes we just get too carried away with squeezing a piece of fabric out. So if I just put this like here, I can turn around and get my other 2 right here, and I don't have to fidget with everything so much. So let me get my little sandwich going. And I'm getting all bendy again, so I'm going to need my tape. Because you can see it wobbling. So I don't want it to move when I put the other 2 pieces on top. And I can put this one down the bottom. And again, see how I have the fabric hanging off? That's fine, but I don't want my die hanging off. That wouldn't be good, because that would probably snap the die, I would guess. And if I cut a little bit of this other fabric with this die, it doesn't matter. It's just the waste of it anyway. Okay? So we're going to sandwich it up and go ahead and run it through the cutter. Now, I try to cut and sew with you the same way I do when I'm by myself, and whatever issues I run into, that's fine, because you may run into them as well. So here's my square. And we're going to use this again for the next block, so I'm just going to set it aside. And I'm going to untape this, and I'm just going to move it up a little ways, because you take this tape off just for a second. These are kind of big scissors for taking a thread out. Okay, so I've got two. I need two more. So see how I can just turn it? And now I'm not trying to get in that tiny little spot and get it perfect. Okay, now I've got plenty of room, and I'm using that same amount of fabric. So if I remember how I folded it over and it barely fit and I had to be careful, well, I just didn't fold it over. I don't have to be as careful in lining it up, because I have extra room now, because the fold, whenever you fold something, the fold takes up some of the fabric that you can't use. And then I'm just going to run these two through. Okay, and I'm going to set my plates aside, take my tape off. Actually, I just need to take my tape off of this section, because I'm going to throw this piece of fabric away. We're going to save, no, this die is going to get put away. So let's put this half square, the 2.5, back in its area, because we're not using it again. We're going to use a different size on the next part. Okay, is everybody good so far? So this is going to be a little odd, but I really kind of thought it was the best way. So we need to have, what in essence we're doing is we're putting one of these on each corner. See, now I got my square on point. You see how that is? So let's take this one and this one. So we're going to use opposite corners first. Okay? So I'm going to do one at a time. I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to pull it back towards the center until both edges of the half square are equal to the edge of the square. So let me put a little pin in that. And see if I can hold that up for you to see. So see how this edge right here, oh, got a two-handed here. Oh, hold on. Okay. This edge and this edge of the half square are even with the sides. And your point should be pretty much in the middle to this point. Okay? So this little diamond, triangle, should be, even on both sides. Oh, thanks, Rhonda. Thank you for letting me know. So when we sew this, we're going to sew in just inside of this end point like we always do. So let me do mine first and show you, and then you can do yours. Just in case I'm a little off. So I guess I could, I hadn't thought about it, but I guess I could use my guide along the red, along my half square triangle. So let me give it a whirl, because it may be too far to the left, and I'll tell you in a second. That's why I don't want you to sew yours first, but I need to go back a little bit because I'm a little too far down the fabric. Okay, so let's take it to the work table and see how it worked out. So when I flip this back, it should perfectly cover this piece, and it did. Okay, I hadn't tried it with the 1/4 inch foot with the guide on it. Okay, you just want to make sure that you're out to the edge on this. So if you look, let's see if you can see. If you look up here at this end, oh, give me a second because I'm looking backwards here. You see, here's that corner is here. See how I'm just inside the corner? Oh, that looks pretty good. See how I'm not right to the, so the corner is, let me see if I can point to it. The corner is right here, and I'm just inside it. And when I used my seam guide on my 1/4 inch foot with the guide, it did that. Okay, we're not going to cut this off until we know that that is straight. So if that came out like this, you have too big a seam. You need to take it out and do it again. Okay? So that's good. I'm going to give it a little press. Now, this red could be a tad bigger. That's okay. You'll be fine. And I mean a tad is a little tad. So see how it covers that? See? So now I can go ahead and trim the background or the square fabric off. So the seam allowance is the same on both. If you want to save that, you go right ahead. Okay, and then I'm going to come over to here and do this one. So let's get these two done, and we'll just stop for a second. So you can go ahead and start on one corner, then you're just going to do the opposite corner. Okay, and again, don't place it like this, because when you flip it forward, it's going the wrong way. You got to turn it around so your point is pointing towards the center. So I just bring it in like this, And then I just come forward, I'm coming towards me until both of those corners of the half square triangle are even with the square, and this looks pretty good. And if you want to, let's see, if you want to put your ruler down, because I know Lynn likes to do this, right, Lynn? So I'm just putting my ruler down. My line of my ruler is going straight with the bottom of this half square triangle, and I can see that this point and this point are right in line, and I've got a line going across. It goes across the bottom of that, so I know it's straight. How's that, Lynn? And what did I do with that one lonely pin? And I'm holding this down with these two hands, or two fingers. It's like I have three hands. And just pinning that. I don't want to pick it up and pin it, because you pick up and pin things and, you know, everything goes downhill from there. Okay? One at a time. Don't try to pin both and do both at once. You want to do one. Make sure that you've got the right spot on your machine to get so this flips up and covers. So now see how this red is even with the block. But again, if it's a hair past, we can fix that. You just have to give it a little trim, a little haircut. Okay, so let's go one corner, then the opposite corner. And you're probably already ahead of me, so just make sure when you start that so I put my foot down. Now I'm going to look, and I'm going to pull my fabric towards me, because I find for me, I'm too far onto my fabric when I do these, and that edge doesn't look right. So I'll try to keep my hand out of the way. So I barely want to have fabric under the needle. And I've got a big piece of fabric, and it's not the corner of the fabric, so it shouldn't suck down into the hole of your sewing machine like you do if you were doing an actual corner. I'm going to stitch away and then take that pin out. See if I can get it right twice. Wouldn't that be nice? Okay, what kind of face is that, Lynn? I have to look closer. Cool. Oh, I caught. Oh, let me get back to the work table. So my little corner was just flipped towards me a little bit. I just had to push it back. So again, I'm going to fold it over and make sure that when I press it, it's covering that piece behind. If it's not, and it's off, you made too wide of a seam. So take it out and come just inside of it, like stitch right beside of it, okay? Just make sure before you do that that you don't have a crease here, that you really have pushed it all the way up, okay? I'm close to being almost too short, so I'm gonna move my I'm not gonna make sure I'm gonna make sure I don't push my fabric to that seam guide too much. Okay, so we got two done, and we want to make sure we trim them before we do the next part, because this part is going to be a bit over these, and then you won't be able to trim that fabric, or you might not be able to trim that fabric. So we're going to do the exact same thing, except I have to do it towards me. Okay. So I'm lining up again my two sides, and if I want to check like I did before, I'm going to take a place on my ruler where it's straight, and that straight goes along the bottom of the half square triangle. So it's straight along here, and my point for my half square and my point for my square are right in line with each other. Okay? I came in too close to the corner. Okay? Pin in. And I gotta get my thread is bunched up I'm in my own way. You doing good? So this time I want to have a little more to flip over. So I am a thread to the left of my guide. That's how little distance. Almost rolled right on past my pin. Okay, I'm going to flip that up, and I'm good. So actually, oh, let me show you at the work table. So you could have, see how mine is a, can you see mine is a tad, oh, hold on, let me press it. See if you can see it here. You see that the red is just a little past the white? I can always trim that if I need to. Okay, so there's a balance between, and every machine is going to be different. Every sewer is different. So I was like a thread to the left of my guide, and that was just a little too far. So I need, and that's like why I like to do one at a time. So if I want to do this over, just so you see, normally I wouldn't do it over because I could square up the block after. But if I have to do it over, this is how easy it is to do. Okay, seams undone. Get the thread out. It only takes a second. And I am going to use my little roller. I want to roll, because remember I rolled and creased that seam. I'm going to take that. I want to take that crease out. And all those little threads. Okay. So I almost did this. Put it here. Whenever you put your corner down, always automatically flip to see how it looks. And then you go, oops, needs to be this way around. Oh, nobody said, how did you like the little music at the beginning while you were waiting? Okay, if you didn't like it, don't tell me. It's the Schoolhouse theme song. Okay, so I can see now, now I'm fidgeting too much, and this is what ends up happening. You start fidgeting too much, and you just make everything worse. It's not our prom dress. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead back and sew. And you guys can go ahead and sew and get yours done while I'm fidgeting around here. Flip that up, and now that's, and now that's fine. We want to pay attention to these corners because you should have a 1/4 inch of the red past the point for the whatever seam allowance may be on the side. There's not going to be one on the side because this is our little sample. And you notice I'm doing this with my scissors. If you want to do it with your rotary cutter, you go ahead, but I'm good with the scissors. If you use your rotary cutter, use a ruler. Don't just willy-nilly rotary cut. That could end up in a disaster. So again, I'm going to place this on. The minute I place it down, doesn't matter if it's lined up exactly right, but I am going to flip it and go, oh yeah, that's right. That's how that's supposed to look. I'm good. I'm good. I'm at least on track. And the corners of the half square triangle that you're putting down should be at the corner of the half square triangles that are already down. Because if you look here, the corners go over each other, and that's what gives that little bit for seam allowance. Oh, nobody said if they like the music. That's not good. Did you hear music? How about that? Did you hear any music? That's how I can test my sound now. I'm not sure if my needles, yeah, couldn't tell if my needle was threaded or not. No, I knew something wasn't right there. Oh, that didn't sound good. Did you hear that? That didn't sound good at all. So when I have trouble with my thread, oh, let me switch over. I didn't switch over there. When I have trouble with my thread for any reason, I'm going to re-thread my bobbin. And if I had a lot of trouble, oh no, there's no music now, Rose. It was way back in the beginning. Your hearing's not as what it used to be. I know that feeling. If I'm having a lot of trouble, I would cut my thread up at the top, pull it through and rethread. But I think I just didn't, my needle wasn't threaded. Okay, I threw that thread to the trash can, but it didn't make it to the trash, and I can't tell where it is. I'm sure it'll probably stick to my foot later. That was pretty funny, Rose. I just had the music on before the 7 o'clock time, the 15 minutes or so beforehand. Because if I go on to YouTube with it 15 minutes ahead, it sends you the message if you've signed up to get the reminders. It sends you the message that I'm online, but at least you won't miss the beginning of the class. So I try to go on about 10 or 15 minutes ahead of time, and I usually do a sound check, but I did it with music this time. Okay, so I'm pinning again, and you can see I'm past my edge. So I just gotta fidget with it for a second. Does seem a bit fidgety, doesn't it? You do a few of them, you'll get used to it. Okay, there we go. See if I can keep my needle threaded. I'm holding my fabric when I take that pin out. I know I say that over and over. I might have steered a little crooked there. Oh, Lynn, you didn't hear music either? Well, I heard it. Oh. So I sewed this one a little crooked. So see how I got a little white showing there? Let me just press this and make sure. So that means I sewed it a little on an angle, but this is just my sample, so I'm not gonna, have you painfully watch me. So I'm just gonna trim it out and leave it. But if it was going in my quilt, I'd have to fix it. Maybe the other way. Maybe I'll have to show you next week the other way using the 3.5 inch square. Maybe it will actually be easier. Okay, so there's our second. Oops, sorry. There's our second sample, and it's the diamond in a square, or some people call it a square in a square. I'm just going to stick that guy in there. Remember, I just staple them in. So now we're going to do the snowball block. And you notice on this one, there's space here. So it's not a square in a square or a diamond in a square. It's called the snowball block. So the difference is going to be the size of these corners. And so we're still using the 4.5 inch square, and we really need to use the 4.5 inch square for this one because part of the square shows on each side. Where this one, we cut it away. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so this is a snowball block. And some people might do these corners. You might see a snowball block that's the corners a little smaller. Then you would go down to like the 1.5 inch half square triangle. But I did it with the 2 inch. Okay, so we already have our square die still out. So now we need to get our 2 inch half square. And the 2 inch is on the opposite side. You would think that the 2 inch came after the 2.5, but that's a 1.5. We're coming over here for the 2 inch. So while I have it open, I can snap back the rest of these guys that we took out earlier. There we go. And now I want the 2 inch, and that was the smallest one on this side. So do you see, if I'm working in my dies, I just set them in like that. I don't bother pushing them all back down until I'm all done. I just want them in their little place where they belong because I don't want to mix them up with the quarter square triangles by mistake. And even though they're different, we don't pay that much attention. Okay? So let me clean up a bit of this mess. Before I bring my plates back. Oh, when we get done, I'll try to see if I can play a little music for you. I'll end it with the music in the beginning. That'll throw everybody off, won't it? Okay, so I got my square and my half square. So I need my plates. And don't forget, if you're cutting tonight, make sure before you put everything away, run your plates through as a sandwich with no dies, one time with the metal in it, and then take the metal out, and then you have the top plate, bottom plate, and the plastic, and run it like twice. I run it once, then I flip it over and turn it and run it again. And don't do more than that, because then it goes downhill from there. Okay, so I need some fabric. Well, I guess I can stay with my theme, right? So now, just as a little aside, so I have this piece of fabric left. So I can either cut this piece here, or I could cut over here. I'm going to cut over here because it leaves me a bigger piece left over. You see what I mean? If I cut here, this is narrower. It's a little bit longer, but I think I'd rather have the fatter piece. And I might as well just cut this end off because I know it'll just be an issue. So there's my die. I want to make sure this is a big thing for me. I'm always have the die upside down so it's cutting into the plastic instead of into my fabric. And I'm going to put that at the top with a little piece of tape. And now I need enough fabric for 4 of those. So I need to pay attention to straight of grain. So my straight of grain is here. And I have a really big piece of fabric, so I have to decide which way do I want to. Do I want to go this way or do I want to go this way? Now, another one that and it may be helpful to you, maybe not, but see how long this is. So if I cut off this bottom, I have a shorter piece of fabric. So I'm going to go this way because I maintain the length, and there's a lot of times you just need that little bit of extra length that you can't get this way. So I'm going to fold. I'm going to set this down. Okay, so I got enough there. And you know, I'm a Yankee, so I'm real skimpy with my fabric. So I'm just kind of folding and folding. So see, I got 2 folds down here. I just want to make sure that my fold here, I do my fold, you can see it. See the back side of the red fabric? I put it a little past this one, then I know I have plenty. So I'm just going to, I've got enough for 4 because I'm folded twice. That should make 4. 2 and 2 should make 4. And again, you could use your rotary cut if you wanted to. So see, I still have all this length, and I still have some of my width. Could I have cut that off? Yeah, but why? When I might have something that's bigger that goes there. If it was a smaller piece of fabric left, then I wouldn't care. But I try to, if it's a bigger piece of fabric, I try to keep it big as long as I can. So I got my double fold. I'm on my straight of grain. I'm going to tape this down. I don't want to be hanging off this edge. I don't want to be too close to this one. If one die goes over the other die, you've wrecked both dies. Because there's so much pressure and the dies are thin, it would probably cut them both like right in half. So don't, I tend to stay, you know, I don't tempt fate with that. And I'm going to move this over just a little bit because I don't need to be close to this edge. Because there's nothing I'm going to save here. So I don't need to be close to the edge. I can stay sort of centered there. Okay, so let's make our sandwich. We're on our last sample. I find sometimes, and maybe it's just me, I find sometimes that the more I'm cutting, the less bending I have with my plates and stuff. And I think it can do like 10. That's okay. I'm going to put my die, just put it in my half square drawer. And my other die, and just stick it in my drawer. I can arrange it later. It's going in my square drawer. And see, you know, there's nothing like, now, could I cut something out of that side? Yeah. Oh, out of that side? Yeah, maybe. Not today. Okay, and I'm going to put my plates all out of the way. I want to get all my tape off. I don't like to leave tape on. I find if you leave it on too long, it's just harder to get it off later. And it gives me a chance to get a drink of water. Okay, so we're doing the snowball. Oh, let's see if I can. Which way do I need to go? Oh my God. Yeah. Because now I'm going to be in the way of my own sewing. But okay, so again, they're going in the corners. Okay, so opposite ends. Now, these you can actually sew on all four before you do your trimming because they don't overlap each other. So let's do that. I always do one, sew it, fold it over, make sure it's lined up before I whip around all four of them and find out my seam allowance was off. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. Okay, we're laying it on until these sides meet, and your little triangle point should be matching this point. Okay, so let's say we'll put our other, let's just do two because they're not bigger, they're not going to run into each other. So let's pin it on. Well, you know what? Let's not, because then you'll go whip right around and sew the other one, and we want to make sure this seam allowance is first. I'm making sure that you don't. I'm trying to keep you from making too many mistakes at one time. There's nothing worse than sewing all of them on thinking you're all that and you find out, yeah, you're not. Happens to me all the time. Okay, so let's just get sewing. It's the same thing as before. Okay. Looks good. It's covered that corner. Now I'm going to the opposite corner. And again, when I set it down, I'm just going to do a quick flip. Oh yeah, going in the right direction. That little second it takes you to flip that fabric is going to save you. I was going to say, what did I do with my pen? I play that music at the end. I'm gonna have to remember to make sure I cut it off later on. Okay, so you can see. So I got both my ends. Now I can pin these both because I think I got the hang of it now, right? So again, you automatically try to do this. When you flip, you're going the wrong way. So no matter how many of these you do in a row, just do that little flip. Bless you, Caspian. And now I can go around and do this one. Set it down, flip. So I'm going to go ahead and sew one and then sew the other. We're getting to be grown-ups now. We've moved up a grade or two. We haven't graduated. We're getting close. Okay, we got all 4 corners done. All right, so I'm just going to press them up just to make sure before I trim that everybody's covered. Okay, so this time I'll trim with my rotary cutter. What I do with it? Oh, behind me. And I'm just going to lay my ruler so that the 1/4 inch line on my ruler lines up with my seam. I could go a little smaller, but we'll go 1/4 inch. And I can just go around. Just make sure that you've laid your corners back. I've had students have it like this and trim their thing right off. There's very few times, if any, that I can say that a student made a mistake nobody else has ever made. Or the students made a mistake that I haven't already made. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And now I'm going to give it a regular press. I'm trying not to go too far out to the edge. I'm trying to stay just over it. See if I can show you this way. So when I press this, I let the iron push it forward. And you see I'm not going to the edge. I'm just going where the seam is. If you go to the edge, just lift. And I always do both sides. So if I'm pressing this way, I shouldn't get into any trouble. Oh my God, there's a bird in the middle. Can you believe that? Does that make up for my pinwheel not being perfect? Look, there's a bird right in the middle. How cool is that? Of course, it's just a sample. I have nowhere to put it. So this is a 4.5 inch. This is a 4.5 inch block. So should you have a 4.5 inch ruler, which I think you should have every size at some point, I can put this on and I'm going to kind of line up. I can't line up with the 2. I'd have to line up with the 2 1/4 because 2 1/4 and 2 1/4 is 4.5. So I want to make sure the 2 1/4 is in this, and it's in the center of this. And the same this way. And then I can trim it up if I need to trim it up. I have to stand up because the seat's too low for my cutting table. And then it just looks so much neater. So there we go. That's our third sample. So these might not all be exactly the same, but don't forget you're going to have a 1/4 inch seam here. So that's going to make this opening, the white, a little bigger because it's going to take more of the red away. So don't get too distressed about that. I can see I have one that's a little bigger. So this guy, I didn't push down far enough. But like I said, it's our sample. So let me get the page. So next week, we're going to make this block. And it really is several of the blocks that we've already made put together to make an 8-inch block. So there's our square in a square, the diamond in a square, flying geese. So you can take the pieces. I want to do this one next week so that you can see that you take the pieces and put them together to make your 8.5 or 8-inch finished block. So that's going to be our next week. And you just have to have a little more scraps of fabric than normal. I'll throw a picture up of it probably on Wednesday or so onto Facebook. But for those of you that don't do Facebook, I'm trying to do it so it doesn't. We're just gonna take some of what we've learned, some of what we made, and put it together to make a bigger block. And keep in mind, the point of our resource book is all the blocks can work together. So if I have an 8-inch block, this is 8-inch, I can put beside it 2 4s or 2 4s. Or in the case of the flying geese, this is only 2.5. I could put, 4 flying geese and they would all fit together. And we'll get to that point and I'll show you how you can mix the size of your blocks, or take 4 blocks, 4 4-inch blocks, and the way you set them makes a different kind of 8-inch block. Well, that sounds confusing, doesn't it? But it won't be confusing because we'll have a sample of everything in the book, so that you can stick with the 4 and the 8 and know that you can mix and match whether you're making a table runner. So if you made a table runner and you wanted a certain size or you wanted something in between, you could put a row of flying geese on either side of this so that you can get the size of whatever size you want your project to be. So let me do there we go. So that's our next week's, this is our next week's job. So there's 3 colors there. You could make this one a 4th color if you wanted to. So if you wanted to fussy cut something, like the bird ended up being, the bird in the middle, you could fussy cut and have something in the center. You could have an embroidery. You could have a word embroidery, anything you want in that center. Okay, so I'm going to try to make, there we go. So if anybody wants to take a picture of it with their camera, just to remind you, that's fine. And I will put a page up for this on Facebook with the link, or I'll put the link like I did tonight. I'll put the link right at the right underneath the description of this tutorial. Okay. So everybody, thanks for joining in. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're making your resource book and it helps make things a little less confusing for you. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel. Hit the little bell to get the reminders. And do the thumbs up. And I always say, I don't need you to do the thumbs down. I'm okay with that. If you just don't want to watch, I'm good with that. You don't need to give me the thumbs down. So thanks, everyone. I'll see if I can play a little music at the end. Let me see if I can do it now before you go. So